Hello, I'm Adam Southern, and this is Page by Page, a show dedicated to promoting literacy, authors, their works, and their words. And today I'm honored to have C.J. Redwine with me.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you. C.J. Redwine is the author of the Defiance trilogy, and the second book of the trilogy, Deception, came out in August of 2013, and we'll be talking about the book a little bit today. Really excited to have you with me.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Good. Before we get started with the book, though, let's talk a little bit about you. Who is C.J. Redwine, other than an author?
You know, that's one of those really deep questions that I don't really know how to answer. No, I'm just kidding. I am mom with 5 children, 3 biological boys, 1 girl that we brought home from China a couple years ago, and we're going back to China this summer to bring home our 5th, another daughter. So I'm a fierce advocate for adoption. I do a lot of speaking about adoption, educating, and things like that. Obviously, I write a lot, and I am a fangirl, unabashed. Harry Potter, Sherlock, Supernatural, Benedict Cumberbatch, you know, all things Benedict. Fangirl, read a lot, go to movies a lot. I go to probably 7 or 8 movies a month. My husband critiques movies, and so we get to go to the pre-screening. So that's usually fun, unless you have to go to several in a row that you're like, Kevin Costner again. That's fun. And other than that, I mean, I'm just kind of a little bit boring. I stay home with my kids, and I sometimes clean my house. Not really. And I cook. I like to cook, and that's, you know, that's my life.
Sounds pretty good to me. Yeah. There might be 1 or 2 people out there that haven't read the first book in the trilogy, Defiance. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Defiance is a post-apocalyptic fantasy. I had no idea that's what it was when I was writing the book. I was just like, oh, this story. And then afterwards, my agent said, what genre is this? And I went, young adult. So it is post-apocalyptic, about 50 years after we tunneled too deep looking for, a little shout out to Lord of the Rings there, we dug too deep. And we were looking for an alternate source of energy. And we released these Leviathan-like creatures that are basically wingless dragons that tunnel up from beneath and just destroy everything. And we reformed into 9 city-states across the eastern half of the continent. And so the story of Defiance picks up as these societies have already been in place. And Rachel is our heroine. She's the redhead on the cover here. And her father is a courier between city-states. The wasteland between the city-states is extremely dangerous. That's where you have the beast tunneling up. You have gangs of highwaymen. I mean, it's really a dangerous place to be. And he goes missing. And she thinks there's something else going on other than him getting killed on his way home. And so she ends up committing treason against the brutal leader of her city-state to go out and try to rescue her father. And she ends up starting a war.
Okay, that's what every teenage girl...
I mean, sure, I did that. Year 16, CJ, start a war.
Well, I have to tell you, I really enjoyed Deception. I too missed the first book, Defiance, but I picked this one up, and it could have really been a standalone book. I just got right into the story, could not put it down.
Good.
It was really action-packed, and just was really into the story of Logan and Rachel.
Thank you.
It kept me on my toes a lot. It wasn't just, you know, a post-apocalyptic book. It was also an adventure book. It was a little bit of romance thrown in there. Suspense, so much suspense. How do you keep everything straight when you're writing a book like this?
I have an editor that helps me. This book was actually the book I joked around, but it's really not a joke. It just about ate my soul. I did the first draft, and I didn't feel very good about the first draft of the book. I knew that I didn't quite have it right, because book 2 is really important. It has to be that central point, if you're thinking about a trilogy as being kind of a scale, and it has to perfectly balance book 1 and book 3, but it also has to be a full story on its own. I really, really feel cheated when I go into a trilogy, and then that second book is just sort of this flimsy bridge where nothing happens. So I really wanted to pack it full and make it feel like you'd really had a story that was necessary to the overall plot. So getting that balance, and also getting the balance of the emotional arcs of the characters and everything right, that was really hard to do. So when I turned in the first draft, I turned it in with like this giant caveat attached to it. Like, I know this sucks, help me. And we ended up doing, I think it was 4.5 drafts after that first one in 6 months. I don't recommend that at all. It just about killed me. But it took that long for me to get it Right. I tried a couple different incarnations. I was moving scenes around, and by the time I turned it in, I wasn't even fully set in my mind about what the end version was till I went back through copy edits and read it again and went, okay, that's what we kept. I have a lot of scenes that kind of littered the cutting room floor from that one. So it was really good for me to have that partnership with my editor. She's amazing, and she gets me, and she gets my writing, and she's able to ask the right questions that opens my mind up to other possibilities and helps me to see where it's missing something with pacing or character arc, and I start thinking about how I can, come in and fix that. So it was a lot of work. I don't plan to write a trilogy again for a long time, but I'm proud of the book. At the end of it, I was proud of it.
You should be. It's written in the same style as Defiance, in the fact that it's written from the perspective of Logan and Rachel, and they alternate chapters pretty much. What was the purpose of writing the book in that style, using two different voices?
I actually wrote Defiance. I was almost halfway through Defiance, and it was only Rachel's perspective. And then I realized that Logan was going to do some really cool things because he's an inventor. He doesn't realize it till in Defiance when he gets backed against the wall, but he's also a fighter. And he was going to blow up stuff and escape from a dungeon and all these things off screen. And also Rachel was going to go through some really hard things, and the space in her head was going to be really bleak, and I didn't want to spend the next half of the book only in her head, and I was absolutely sure neither did a reader. So I finally thought, it's not as much fun when the hero shows up later. He's been missing for a third of the book and is like, and by the way, I did blow up a wall. Don't want to brag. It just loses a lot of impact. I wanted people to see how his mind worked and how he'd already thought 5 steps ahead before that scenario even happened, so that he was prepared for it and all of these things. So I was talking that out with one of my friends who's also a published writer, and just saying, how is he gonna say that? How's that information gonna come out? He learns these things, and how does he say that without a huge info dump? Because I hate those. I don't want to do that. And there's this long pause of silence, and she goes, you know what you have to do? And I was like, dang it, I gotta go and rewrite this book. So I went back and took out half of Rachel's chapters from the first half of Defiance and put Logan in there, and it just worked. Everything clicked, and I said, this is what the story needed. Because Rachel's a ruthless person, and we needed to be able to see her through the eyes of someone who knew her before she became so damaged. So it all worked. That's how that happened.
Okay. Now, you've touched on this a little bit before, but let's discuss a little bit more in depth. There's a scene in the book where they come across an abandoned city. They see the Stars and Stripes hanging from a pole. It's just tattered, and some of the younger members of the group never seen the Stars and Stripes before, didn't know that there were 50 states, and they just could not fathom 50 states because of their system of government. Can you explain a little bit the system of government a little bit more in depth for our viewers?
Yeah. Because we have 9 different city-states, actually it's the 9 people who survived from the last military operations team that went down the tunnel to try to destroy, in Defiance they're calling them the Cursed Ones. We actually get a reveal in Deception about some more information about them, but these creatures, these monsters, and the 9 surviving members have discovered a way to keep the creatures at bay, and so they end up setting up the city-states, organizing survivors. So each city-state is really, the government is predicated on the personality of the leader. So where Rachel and Logan grew up, Baal Boden, is a true dystopia. It's very bleak. It's very dictatorship. He's a dictator. He doesn't ask for anyone's opinion. He'll probably kill you if you give him an opinion he doesn't like. And one of the ways that dictators remain in control is to marginalize part of their society and to deny education to their people. We see this going on now. You see this not just in dictatorship, but in ways that we keep women and girls across the globe in bondage. You see this in India with the child marriages, and you see them being kicked out of school at age 8 so that they can go and marry someone who's 40. You see this in Africa, where you see a lot of, not just the girls, but the boys as well, denied an education. Very basic things that we would consider a right here. You see this everywhere. And so I just wanted to show what would happen if you had a situation where the society was set up where the way the leader kept in control was through fear and also through lack of education, not giving people the right to think for themselves and the freedom to have all of the resources and information at their fingertips. And then what would happen if one man, Rachel's father, made a different choice for his daughter and she changed everything? So the other governments are all very different. We see a little bit of that in Lincolnshire in Deception when we go into a different city-state, but then you get to go into 3 other city-states in Deliverance and really see 3 vastly different societies.
And you talked a little bit about Rachel in your last response and how she's changed. Mm-hmm. How do you think this last book, Deception, has changed her?
Deception is where she hits the bottom. She hits rock bottom there. And in some ways, Logan does too at the very end of the book. And that's, as on par with a trilogy structure where you want to break your characters down and have everything at its bleakest moment in the second book, and then you start the upswing. So Rachel she's made some difficult decisions. She's done some things in Defiance that scarred her, and some things have been done to her that scarred her. Basically, she lost her innocence in a big way through the death and the violence of her loved ones and some of the choices that she made. So going into Deception, she did not have any time or space to rest and to grieve and to assimilate. She had to keep going, and in her mind, she thought that meant that she had to be strong and appear strong. And she makes the mistake of thinking that strength is looking like you have it all together when it isn't. Strength is being honest enough about the truth to sit in it and face it for what it is, no matter what that looks like, even if that means that you aren't the one that can keep going and keep people together and give orders. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to take care of yourself first, or you break, and she does break because she makes those poor decisions. And so it's just really, it's that rock bottom. But then we have a person, there's a character, Quinn, in the book, who hit rock bottom for himself the year before, and he was able to give her just enough guidance to put her on the path towards healing, which is harder work than being broken ever was, and more painful. And that was really, if I had to say, adventure, there's murder mystery, there's lots of the battle and war and dragons and all that kind of stuff. What I really wanted to do was I wanted to write a trilogy that was a story about what it looks like to be broken and to heal, and put a lot of truth into that. And this is just redemption, a story of redemption. And you can't be redeemed till till you feel like you've lost all hope. So that's where she is in Deception.
Okay, good. This is the second book in a trilogy. Mm-hmm. The next book's coming out in August of 2014.
Yes.
Yeah. And can you give us a little sneak peek?
I can. I'll try not to spoil anything there, but there's a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end of Deception. I heard from a lot of readers going, "What have you done to us?" Your tears feed my muse. What I did was I got to the point in the story where it felt like the logical place to stop, even though it was terrible place to stop for my readers. So what I can say in vague, non-spoilery terms for Deliverance is that someone dies, which is not a shock to anyone who's read my books, but somebody major dies, and someone is redeemed, who people may not see coming, and somebody comes back from the dead. Yeah.
I can't wait. And I agree with all of your readers. The ending of this book, I was like, I need more.
Yeah.
So, can't wait for the next book. I hope you come back when.
Thanks, I'd love to.
Thank you. Before we go, I ask all of my authors that come on the show, what advice do you have to anyone wanting to be a writer?
Mm-hmm. I would say a couple things. First of all, you need to read, and read widely. Not just read a little bit in your own genre, because it's very crucial to know what's going on in your genre, either because you want to break those rules or because you want to stay within them, no matter what it is, what your reasoning is. You do need to know what's going on in your genre, but to really inform your fiction and to really bring something new and fresh into your genre, you need to read outside of it. So I read historical fiction. I love funny books, even though my books aren't, they have some funny in them, but there are a lot of, death and dragons, bloodshed. And I read some nonfiction, and I read some horror. And so I like to look and see what are people doing in other genres, and then how might I be inspired to bring something new to my own voice. And that's the second thing I would say. If you want to be a writer, it's really important that you take risks and you boldly search for your own voice. Your first few efforts are going to be probably crap. They just are. There's a really big gap between what we want to be able to accomplish and what we can legitimately achieve with our craft at first. So it's really important not to give up, but to just keep working at it and keep experimenting. And you know, I have a really competitive personality, and so one of the best ways to get me to perform well in school was if a teacher said I don't give A's or you know whatever, because I would consider that a challenge. So consider it a challenge to when people say, well, you'll never do this or you can't do that, to find a way to do it. Find out what your voice is. It took me a while of writing. I started out writing adult romantic suspense. That is not my genre at all, but I just tried it because I was reading it at the time and I thought, well, I don't know what to write. I'll try this. And there were glimmers of what I was able to do, but it wasn't my voice yet. And then I moved into adult urban fantasy and it got a little closer, and then I tried first person and it got a little closer. And then I finally decided to try YA because that was what I was reading so much of, and I was so excited about the wide open scope of the genre. And that's where I finally found my voice. And I wrote a book that I thought might be hard to sell. And I'm not saying do that, but it was a risk for me. It was a book that was hard for me to write. It required me to go to some dark places, and it also required me to be pretty bold to write a genre mashup, you know, book and hope to sell it. And my agent was like, "Oh, all right, let's see what you got here." So that's what I tell people when I'm talking to them, because you get discouraged. There's a lot of no. I mean, publishing just kicks you in the face a lot more often than it gives you cookies. So you have to just be willing to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, whether or not you ever achieve every single career goal. You have to just take some risks.
Well, that's good, because a lot of the other authors that have been on the show, they say the same thing: read and take chances. So that's in line with everything I've heard. So that's good advice. You've also written a book that's available in ebook format called Query.
Yes.
So how important is the query letter in wanting to be a published writer?
It's really important. It's an entirely separate skill set from writing a novel. So it's frustrating a lot of times for us as writers when we get to that point in the process and we know we would like to attract an agent or an editor's attention. And I strongly recommend having an agent if you want to be traditionally published, because they can open doors for you with senior publishers and big publishing houses that you can't open on your own anymore. Most of them aren't taking unagented submissions, and they have your best interests at heart. They're watching out for you. They're in your corner. So it's important to learn how to do that, how to query, but also it's important just as a writer to have the skill to be able to take your 100,000 word novel and be able to tell somebody within a few sentences what it is in a way that's interesting to them. Whether you want to be traditionally published or whether you want to be indie published, you're going to be writing your own cover copy if you want to be indie published, and cover copy is the same thing basically as a query. So it's a different skill set, but I think a crucial one for a long-term career.
Good. Yeah, if any of our viewers want to find out more information about you, what do they need to do?
They can just go to cjredwine.com and find out more than they want to know, I'm sure. I'm also on Twitter and I'm on Facebook, and I'm pretty active on both of those. It's a good place to connect with me, and I do try to answer all of my fans.
Good. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate
really
it.
enjoyed your book.
Thanks.
Enjoyed talking with you. And appreciate everyone watching. If you want to find out more about Page by Page, find us online at pagebypagetv.com. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks for watching, y'all. Keep reading and visit your local library.